out at the store, or why there's suddenly a huge price increase on eggs. Is it all luck, or is there a deeper meaning behind it all? Today, we'll be discussing global supply chain disruptions like these stockouts and price increases, along with resilient strategies to combat those disruptions. I'm Alan Vatican, and with me are my team members, Simon Fernandez, Hayden Burns, Greta Grabeau, and Isaiah Perales. You can look forward to hearing about the problems of global supply chain disruptions, some industries affected, reactions, potential future problems, and how we plan to solve these problems.
Thank you, Alan. Some examples of global supply chain disruptions are COVID-19, the Suez Canal blockage, and the Russian-Ukrainian war. We'll be talking about the effects of COVID-19 in depth today. So, how do we safeguard against these future disruptions? First, we need to look at the root of our issues. The problem with global supply chain is that it can be quite vulnerable due to many unexpected events, like the ones we're speaking about today. These disruptions, though difficult, help uncover a lot of what is wrong with our global supply chain. Some issues we have found are the lack of supplier diversity, having just-in-time inventory mindsets, and lastly, a lack of contingency planning. Now, Greta will talk about how these issues impacted the car industry, specifically during COVID-19.
Thank you, Simon. During COVID-19, we saw a lot of problems regarding the automobile industry. The automobile industry is responsible for 3% of our global economy. Although that number seems small, when there is as big of an issue as there was during COVID, that allows for the economy to take a big hit. Several car manufacturers were unable to keep up with demand and could not produce fast enough. Exports from Japan decreased by 46%. Additionally, there was a chip shortage. Factories that were making chips for the cars were understaffed and undersupplied, thus not being able to keep up with demand. The impact of all these problems was large. Overall, there was a 16% decline in vehicle production globally. In the United States specifically, there was a 19% manufacturing decline. Global sales dropped to $68.3 million. And lastly, as a result of all of this, car prices for consumers drastically increased. As you can see, individual car prices started around an average of a little under $20,000 at the end of 2019. Then they dipped a little bit at the beginning of 2020, but since then, they've had a relatively steady increase throughout 2021. The average price of a car at the end of 2021 was $27,569. The first graph shows how COVID affected the car industry in Japan. As you can see, production decreased significantly, as well as exports and sales. This next graph shows how reliant the US is on Chinese car parts. Since exports were halted globally, the United States was greatly affected and our production of cars was greatly decreased. Now Isaiah will talk about how COVID affected the pharmaceutical industry.
Thank you, Greta. Lockdowns disrupted a lot of production and distribution of medication and pharmaceutical supplies. A lot of our medication and supplies came from India and China, and we began to become too dependent on them. Exports were limited too, due to shortages of workers and not being able to supplies in and out of the country. The United States exports 80% of its raw materials to produce medicine. These problems had a big impact. There were shortages of essential medicines worldwide. There was also less supply and production of personal protective equipment or PPE, which also led to a lessened availability of doctors. Because there were fewer doctors and medication, there were increased patient risk. As a resilience strategy within the pharmaceutical industry, project crashing was used. Vaccine trials were sped up and overlapped a little in order to get vaccines out sooner. This increased costs, but it allowed for a much quicker turnaround. Now Hayden will talk some more about the reactions to the problems COVID brought about.
Thank you, Isaiah. COVID-19 had major effects on businesses, economies, and consumers. For businesses, government-mandated shutdowns affected their costs and revenues. Many businesses were not able to work, thus causing revenue to be lost. A lot of businesses also had to do wage cuts and job cuts in order to stay in business. Overall, a lot of money was lost. The economy as a whole saw a rise in inflation. Global poverty also increased. Due to shutdowns and shortages, exports and imports were very volatile. Consumers also suffered greatly. We saw price increases for essentially every product. There were also delays in getting products due to shortages. Lastly, there was a major behavioral shift. There was a major shift in food, and people started spending more money on grocery shopping rather than going to restaurants. There was also an increase in demand for some more affordable substitutes. For everyday necessities, now Alan will touch more on another big reaction COVID caused.
Along with the reactions Hayden just talked about, hoarding was another major reaction. Grocery and convenience stores constantly ran out of toilet paper, hand sanitizer, and other key items like food and medical supplies. This happened due to major stockouts and shortages, as we have mentioned. Companies were unable to predict the major stockouts that COVID would cause, and many grocery stores that practiced just-in-time stocking suffered. However, all of this wasn't just because of the stores. Consumer behavior played a major part in this. Consumers panicked and overbought a lot of products, like toilet paper and hand sanitizer. Stores can help combat this by trying to anticipate major events like pandemics, having a safety stock, and limiting the amount of items a consumer can buy at a time. This graph shows the sales increases in percentages of paper towels in the US. It skyrocketed to 154% in a week during March. Now, Simon is going to talk about the potential future supply chain disruptions.
There are several different reasons why our supply chain could be disrupted. Geopolitical tensions is one of the first reasons. The US-China trade war and tariffs on exports could allow for a disruption. Additionally, the Russia-Ukraine conflict has and can continue to cause problems for getting products such as fuel. These tensions could cause low s- these tensions could cause problems for getting products such as fuel. These tensions could cause low supply chain as well as increased cost. Climate change can also be a potential disruption. With more extreme weather and natural disasters, this could halt imports and exports, which would disrupt the different supply chains around the world. Lastly, pandemics are increasing threat. With pandemics, we need to do our best to limit panic buying and prevent stockouts. Although we're able to bounce back from COVID, there are still some ways to improve our resilient strategies. And now Greta is going to talk about proposed solutions.
Some proposed solutions and strategies we came up with are companies doing a process and bottleneck analysis, utilizing artificial intelligence, and contingency planning. Especially when a disruption like COVID occurs, it's best to look at a company and supply chain's process after the fact and see where the weaknesses are. For example, looking at the Suez Canal blockage and how that weak point impacted millions of people, we need to come up with a plan of what to do if that happens again, or better yet, try and prevent it completely. Identifying bottlenecks and exploring ways to overcome them will significantly improve our supply chains. Also, diversifying suppliers and not relying on one sole supplier will decrease shortages. Without just having one supplier, it's okay if that supplier runs into a disruption because now companies will have multiple suppliers to source from. Constantly reevaluating our processes and where bottlenecks occur will ensure we have the most efficient supply chain.
We also propose utilizing artificial intelligence. Utilizing AI would significantly reduce costs and can provide more cost and time efficient answers by analyzing an enormous amount of data quickly. Artificial intelligence can also interpret all this data and better predict future disruptions. AI can help prevent stockouts by finding substitutes of products very quickly if a company accurately tracks and records their inventory. AI would also help increase organizational learning. Teaching employees how to effectively use AI to increase their productivity would allow for a more efficient supply chain as a whole.
And lastly, which may be one of the most important solutions, we have contingency planning. We have seen what happens when a pandemic or a canal blockage completely stops our global supply chain. Preparing for future risk and having the mindset that anything can happen could greatly benefit companies worldwide. By following industry trends and looking at past disruptions, we can make contingency plans for every scenario. We can also increase our safety stock to try and ensure we don't have as many stockouts and have more inventory on hand. This picture shows what a basic contingency plan can look like, which involves finding the scope of the project, assessing risk, making a plan, testing that plan, constantly reviewing, and documenting.
Although we have seen some major disruptions in our supply chain, we have also seen resilience and how we can bounce back. It is so important to have a solid plan and always be mitigating risks. Even though implementing these solutions and always being prepared can be costly, it's extremely less expensive than having to bounce back from a complete disruption. We must always be prepared for the future and have a plan for whatever may come. Thank you. And here are citations.